Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Wednesday, the 8th day of the month of October 2025. It is Wednesday of the 27th week of the year, the 27th week in Ordinary Time. It is Wednesday, so it is Community Mass Day at the Franciscan School. And so they are here behind me within the church now celebrating Mass together, but I am out here doing our little reflection for today. So on this Wednesday of the 27th week of the year, the book of the prophet Jonah continues, and here we have now Jonah angry that God did not exact punishment upon the inhabitants of Nineveh after God saw that they had repenting of their wickedness and whatever it was. Jonah wants basically God to punish the people of Nineveh because Jonah has things as a human being does, and again, people do wrong and they should be punished, and particularly in the way that we as human beings want them to be punished, but God didn't do that. And so Jonah gets angry and he just marches away, again, furious that God didn't do these terrible things to the people in this capital city of the Assyrian Empire. Well, what happens is that Jonah finds himself again, I guess, in a sort of a desert kind of a place where it is very hot, and then God sends a tree that grows, I guess, very quickly to give him shade and comfort and coolness and whatever it is. And Jonah is very, very happy with this tree, and that's done this nice thing to him to keep him comfortable in the heat. Again, as he's fuming over the fact that God didn't do the terrible thing that God was going to do to Nineveh. But then God sends a worm, I guess, that infects the tree, and the tree dies immediately. And then a scorching east wind comes, then the sun beats down upon Jonah's head, and Jonah is very unhappy. He just wants to die now because life is just terrible for him, and he's just so angry. Again, he's like a child. It's this kind of adolescent response again to God's wonder and God's beauty towards others that we don't want God to do. And this is always the problem with us, is that we have this situation in which sometimes, again, we want God to do as we want, and when God doesn't do that, we act as spoiled, angry children. And that is not, again, good for us. That is not really what our faith is about, and that's not what we're called to be as witnesses to the gospel. And so basically, God says to Jonah, again, why are you angry and everything else like that? Do you just want to die? And Jonah's like, yes, of course, yeah, because nothing is good. You didn't destroy Nineveh, and you put this tree up, and then you destroyed this tree, and my life is terrible, and I don't like it, and everything else like that. So basically, God then says to Jonah, but again, you were worried about this tree, that comes and goes, and you didn't do anything to make it happen. And yet, there were all of these people in Nineveh who your preachings changed the hearts of, and that caused them, again, to be spared from whatever anger and punishment God originally wanted to give to them. Is that not good? Is that not wonderful? Is that not showing something that you were able to do, again, at my prompting, God says? Again, this is the whole thing, is that sometimes, again, we don't realize how we can be instruments, again, of helping people's hearts change and people move closer to what they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to live in this world. But sometimes, again, our own human, limitations of the world and limitations of everything else just get in the way of everything that is important, and we can't let that happen. And so, in Luke's Gospel, again, we have Jesus introducing the Our Father. Again, a much simpler Our Father. Again, speaks basically of God's, hallowedness. Again, or it doesn't even speak of God's hallowedness. It just basically says our Father, and then it moves into wishing for the kingdom to come, for us to be fed, for forgiveness, to be apparent in everybody, and make sure that it's mutual and reciprocal, and then to make sure that we are not led, into temptations that may undo us in many ways. The basic factors, there again, always about relationship in the end. It's not just a prayer about us and a prayer about what it is that we can get from God, but it's a prayer basically that allows us to recognize that because we have this relationship with God, we should be acting and living in a certain particular way. And when we fail to do that, we really aren't giving any credibility to the fact that we are part of this life of God. It's also interesting to note that in Luke's Gospel, when Our Father is introduced, the apostles asked to be taught how to pray the way that John taught his disciples to pray. We don't really ever have any record of what it is that John said to his disciples about how they should pray and what that should be about, but it's always something kind of interesting as a little hole within all of this. But remembering relationship, and remembering, again, how our own relationships and our own actions may help others, again, to see more about themselves and to become the people that they are called to be, is very important and very in keeping with who it is that we ourselves are called to be. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.